Welcome, one and all, to the Ferret and Raccoon podcast, episode 172. I am your one and only host for this podcast, bringing you the first podcast of August 2021. And right off the bat, I'm just going to say this episode is going to be a little bit freelance for a couple reasons. The first reason being I almost kind of forgot to do the podcast. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. I'm currently off. The children are off because it's the 6/5 week summer holiday. I'm also off as well. And I've just been so busy relaxing and just ignoring the current world that I actually kind of forgot to do this podcast. Now, that's not to say I'm unprepared. I know what I'm going to talk about and I know what I'm going to say. Obviously, you can tell by the fact that this podcast exists and the fact that there will be links in the description and download link. But yeah, if this podcast sounds a bit different in terms of like its actual structure, and if my voice sounds a bit different, that's because I am checking my notes because I wasn't actually able to finish them all. But luckily for me, and I guess luckily for you guys, it isn't a very big podcast because there honestly wasn't a lot that I thought was that awesome to an extent or worth my time. There was definitely some stuff, and I am well aware of some of the other bigger things that are happening in the world, which I guess are worth mentioning, but I can only really just mention them. I am well aware that it is what's currently happening is the 2021 Japan Olympics, which is going on. I don't know what's going on with it, so to speak. I don't know who's winning. I don't know what medals this country has won. I just don't know. I just have not given it the time. I haven't even watched the opening ceremony. I don't know. They could have referenced me for all I know. And yeah. The other thing I want to quickly mention as well is I am well aware of the whole situation regarding Activision Blizzard. As of, I guess you could say, July 2021, there have been accusations regarding the studio in terms of, I guess, what they're dubbing as frat boy behavior. That essentially comes down to a lot of partying, alcohol, misconduct, sexual harassment, and other nasty things that are supposedly, and I'm going to use the keyword supposedly, happening within that company, because it's not necessarily been confirmed, but there has been a bit of a storm brewing and regarding it. I don't know all the information because, like I've already said, I haven't really been following this kind of stuff. But from what I can gather, without me, trying to present this as actual fact, because we don't know everything about this, I believe it was the state of California that released this, or is going to be suing them or taking them to court over these accusations or over this statement, to which Activision essentially came out and said that, oh no, they were too quick to, I guess, pass judgment. And over the course of a couple of days, a lot of people walked out of the studio. Now, I don't know if they quit or they just decided to walk out and protest. I didn't look too far into it. I just heard that there was a bit of a walkout and that people are going to be boycotting their games, which is not to say that other people weren't already boycotting their games. To be honest, I don't buy anything from Activision, not unless it's Crash Bandicoot, because I'd like to think that I'm buying and supporting the actual studio that made those games, to which I believe it was Toys for Bob and I'm struggling to remember the other people who made the Insane Trilogy. Both of those studios essentially got swallowed up by Activision. For those of you who don't know, Toys for Bob is now on full focus working on Call of Duty. They did Crash Bandicoot 4, and now they're in the Call of Duty mines. So that happened, and I randomly did see an image of, I guess, a couple of employees from Activision, I guess, partying or somewhere, and they had a framed photo of Bill Cosby, which was very weird and very questionable. That photo was taken in 2013, but it still puzzles me as to why you would have a framed photo of Bill Cosby in the first place, even without knowing anything about what's been said about him. But yeah, that's just a couple quick things about, what's been happening over the last few weeks or so. It's been quite eventful, but this is kind of a podcast that talks a lot about potential. That might be the key word for today's episode, is potential. Not necessarily the first trailer I'm about to talk about, because the first one actually kind of pisses me off, and it's barely even a trailer. And that is going to be for the Dead Space remake. Now, this was rumored a little while ago that EA was going to be remaking Dead Space, a game that came out in, I believe, 2009. Fantastic game. You can get on the PS3 and Xbox 360. You can get it on the PC, but that version is pretty busted. And yeah, the rumor has it, or rumor was stated at the time, that they were going to do a remake simply because the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes did well. So this was pretty much EA wanting to cash in, because it is an interesting situation, because EA pretty much destroyed the Dead Space franchise, and I'll get into that in a bit, simply because they deemed survival horror or horror to not be profitable. Simply put, granted, back then, around about 2013, 2015, that was the case. Obviously, Resident Evil 6 had come out, and that was barely a horror game, and other things hadn't really rejuvenated or did anything spectacularly well with that. It wasn't really until, I would say, Resident Evil 7 that we actually got a pretty good renaissance and a sort of like, oh, yay, horror's back to an extent, which was pretty nice. But we have this Dead Space remake, which bothers me a lot, because there's so many things that I don't like about how they're talking about it and what they're going about it. Because the one thing that I think is a key thing that they are saying, and the people the poor people who are remaking this game are saying, is that they want it to be faithful. And I think that's a really stupid way to go about remaking something, especially when you're trying to compare yourself to the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes, which aren't even remakes. They're more or less reimaginings to an extent. And you can bring up the fact that, yeah, they're remaking a game that isn't even 20 years old, as opposed to Resident Evil 2 and 3, which are games that are 20 plus years old. Dead Space 1 looks great. It still plays great. It's still regarded as a fantastic game. No one was asking or begging for a remake. It just comes across as a very shallow cash grab. And I know those words go hand in hand when talking about EA, because they are one of the worst video game companies next to Activision. Hey, it all connects. But it is interesting. Them saying that they're going to be faithful and making all these references to the original isn't promising. The 30 seconds or minute long trailer where they're like, oh, cut off the limbs and remember this section and Isaac's back, that just comes across as pandering to me. I don't want Dead Space 1 again. I would rather you do something new and fresh with it, much like the Resident Evil 2 reimagining did. That game took liberties. It changed things, and in my opinion, it changed things for the better. It in no way did that reimagining portray itself as being the better version or say that the old one is bad. And yeah, no, even with a lot of these visuals, it just looks like Dead Space. It looks like it is just going to be Dead Space 1 again with absolutely no changes. And I believe that because they are really pushing, once again, that faithful. When you hear a massive corporation and company say the word faithful, it usually means safe. They're not going to do anything different with this game. You might get a few changes. You're not going to get anything different. And I know they've already promised that there's not going to be any microtransactions and that, but it's EA. They will find some way to mess this game up. They always do. They haven't had a good game since, well, a game that I would say was made somewhat within their studio being Dead Space 2. I'll be dead honest, that's the last time. Yes, they've published some really great games, but I wouldn't say they made them. Games like Shadows of the Damned, Alice Madness Returns, and a couple of other games that they have funded, but I wouldn't call those EA games. I wouldn't say, yeah, EA made those games good. No, it was the creators and the teams that made those games good. So I really don't understand why they're going about this, because I don't want the original game. It will just pale in comparison, this remake, I think. It's going to, because I honestly think that there is going to be a massive, comparison. Because I think what they're going to do is, their mentality is going to be, better graphics make better games. That results in games selling well, I think, is what the equation is for EA to some extent. And they do kind of, I know they do see dollar signs when they're looking at the Resident Evil remakes. And the thing is, it wasn't the fact that the Resident Evil 2 remakes were or had better graphics. It was the fact that they were reimaginings that balanced the familiar and like the new perfectly. And it features and it honestly just validates and makes this game seem that much more pointless to an extent. I mean, I think I'm rambling at this point, but it is interesting. It is an interesting situation, and I'm totally against it. And one thing I definitely want people to remember is that it is very interesting that it's very interesting that originally, and I don't know who have all the facts, and you can probably find this online, but EA said when Dead Space 3 was coming out that if this game doesn't sell roughly 15 million copies, that's it, there's no more Dead Space. And after Dead Space 3 came out and underperformed because it wasn't a survival horror game, it was a microtransaction third-person shooter, they cancelled the franchise and they liquefied the studio. Now they're bringing back the game, or the franchise, a good, 11-ish, I don't know how many years, over 10 years later. It was about 12 years that game is, the game's about 12 years old now. They're bringing it back now. So it's very hypocritical that EA and the current studio who are remaking this game want to talk about Faithful when they've literally just taken the franchise and the hard work of a team that you basically liquefied and fired some of them so you can remake their property for some quick cash. You can't be proclaiming that you're going to be faithful and do that. That's wrong. And it bothers me a lot of the time when people do this. I can't stand this kind of stuff that happens in the industry. I understand the industry is cutthroat, but you don't have to be like that. You could have literally, if you wanted to be truly faithful, get some of the key people who worked on that game to work on this. They'd know what to do. That would make people buy the game. And speaking of buying the game, please don't buy this game. Vote with your wallet. If you don't like EA, yet you're excited for this game, you're a hypocrite. Okay? Don't buy this game. Buy the Resident Evil 2 remakes instead. Buy Resident Evil 7. Buy Resident Evil 8. They're all great games. Don't buy this game. It will be garbage when it comes out. It will pale in comparison to the original. You only have to watch one video essay to know that. It's awful. Just please don't bother with it. Don't bother with it. But yeah, let's move on to the next trailer, which is another trailer for a game. We've got a few games to talk about and some movies, but we'll get to those. The next one I'll talk about, this is where we actually get to the promising section of the podcast, and that is going to be for I guess it's the overall gameplay trailer for the game Stray. Now, this game was shown off a little while ago, and it didn't really show off anything other than the fact that there was a cat in a sort of futuristic world, and people assumed that you would be playing as the cat. I actually didn't think you would be playing as the cat, but turns out you do play as a cat in this game, and this game has a lot of potential, and it honestly looks really fun and really creative. So what's great about this game is you are going to be playing as a stray cat in a very dystopian, futuristic world, which the moment I saw it, I was like, damn, this looks better than Cyberpunk 2077. But then again, almost every game looks better than Cyberpunk 2077. I really love the aspect of it being kind of like a survival game, but also a sort of combat-ish game, because you do play as a cat, which is awesome, but at the same time, I love the element of you having to survive, as well as you having this robot AI companion, and just the fact that you can communicate with these robot characters is very interesting, with this sort of like computer it has on its back as well. The little robot B12 helps you do things that a cat can't quite do, which is great. I love the fact, and I love the idea of seeing how artificial intelligent robots are going to react to a living organism creature that isn't a human. I'm very interested to see how that's going to work. I'm very interested to see how these robots live. Like, what is their purpose? Excuse me, my voice just went. What is the purpose of their existence for the most part? And I do like the combat as well, if you can call it combat. Hopefully you won't be spending a lot of your time just running. Hopefully it'll be a little bit more puzzle oriented. There's a point where the cat walked on a beam. There was another point where I think the cat was in like some kind of cart. It definitely looks like they're trying really hard to make this game as varied and creative and as fun as possible, which is what we need with a lot of modern games nowadays. And I just love the fact that you can actually defend yourself at some point with that sort of UV ultra light thing. I think that's a great concept, because I'm so sick of games where they think, oh, scary equals you can't defend yourself. There's plenty of games that are scary that you can defend yourself in. So yeah, this game looks really cool. It comes out next year and it's honestly pretty high on my list. Wanted to mention this one. I know a lot of people hyped up for it. Hopefully it does well. Hopefully it gets the attention it deserves, and hopefully it's good at the end of the day. Next trailer I want to talk about is for another game I saw a little while ago but didn't get enough of. I should mention as well that the studio that is going to be publishing all these games is Annapurna Interactive. I'm not 100% sure how you pronounce their name. I know it's Annapurna. They're the people who release such games such as Donut Country, Outer Worlds, Kentucky Route Zero. They're going to be releasing 12 Minutes and Solar Ash, excuse me. And yeah, they're also releasing Stray as well as the next game I'm talking about, which is Neon White, which was created by the guy who did Donut Country, which is a fantastic game. You should go look it up and go play it. And this game, or the trailer I should say, is dubbed as the Speedrunning gameplay trailer. And I am already in love with this game simply because its visual aesthetic and character designs remind me so much of a Suda51 / Grasshopper Manufactures game, such mainly Killer 7 it looks a lot like. And the gameplay and the flow and the kind of design of it does remind me a lot of Superhot as well. So this game has a lot of great things going on for it, and especially the fact that they've tailored it a little bit more around literal speedrunning, I think is a great concept. There aren't too many games I think are doing that pretty well. The only ones I can think of are, once again, Superhot and I guess Doom Eternal to an extent, although that game isn't necessarily made to be speedrun. But I'm really loving this game. I love the aesthetic. I love how your guns kind of give you abilities in terms of how you traverse and how you speed through the level. I think that's great. I think the concept, the fact that you have like 10 days to purge, I can't remember if it's heaven or the world of demons, so that definitely implies a lot of replay value there, because I would imagine it's not going to be the longest game. So already I'm kind of getting hints of Hades in that it's going to be one of those games that you hopefully want to keep playing and keep playing and keep playing. I absolutely love this game so far. There isn't too much to say about it other than it does look promising. I really do love that that rabbit character. I know she's not a rabbit, but she wears a rabbit mask. I think her design is great, and a lot of other things I think are great. This has a lot of potential to be a kind of like a cult game that gets a big audience. I would imagine part of the design and part of the intention is that it does grow within the speedrunning community. I would love to see more people enjoy this game, and I'd love to see this game be great as well. But yeah, wanted to mention this one because I feel like it's not getting as much love as, let's say, Stray or some other bullshit mainstream games that are out right now that people are talking about, which will come out and be disappointing. But yeah, really looking forward to both of those games. Sticking with potential, we have the next trailer, which is going to be for the film just simply titled Lamb. Now, this is one that had a lot of people talking for the most part, because it is a very odd one. It is a very interesting one, as we don't get too much about it other than it seems that there's going to be some farmers, a couple, and I guess a sheep births a lamb, and there's something up with this lamb. Something possibly unholy. But it is interesting to have another film essentially try and make sheep scary. The last film was an Australian comedy horror film called Black Sheep, which has some actually pretty great practical effects. I won't spoil it, but definitely look that up if you want to see something that's really stupid but really well done. And it is interesting, being that when most people think of like demonic animals, it's usually something that has like a biblical or known fear or evil to it. So for example, it's usually like snakes or rats or something. It's usually something that is deemed like evil. But sheep is an interesting choice because most people don't really have an opinion on them being necessarily evil. I know a lot of people say they're creepy, mainly because of their eyes, and I don't find them particularly creepy. But it is worth noting that a sheep or a lamb is very close to a goat, and a lot of depictions of the devil do depict him as goat-like. Another quick reference and interesting thing to note about this film is the fact that it's being published by A24, who also released The Witch, or The Vivitch, however you want to pronounce it. Another film that definitely feels right at home with this one in comparison. But talking about the trailer itself, fantastically shot. It's got a great, simple kind of sense of cinematography. It doesn't feel like it's trying to be overtly cinematic or spectacular. It feels like it's trying to be as natural as possible, trying to tell the simplest story to an extent. And some of the shots were very interesting and very odd, like the one shot of the person like kind of holding the hand of a child who has like a lamb or a sheep's head. There's another shot of the guy just dragging a sheep by its horns. I don't know how they're going to get away with some shots like that. I know that some people who are way too over-enthusiastic about the rights of animals are probably going to have a bit of a fit when they see some scenes in this film. And yeah, some really great shots with the sheep themselves because, yeah, I don't know if the intention, especially when you hear the song, is to portray it as being silly with like some really horrible aspects, because yeah, it is a bit silly that a woman is caring this much about a sheep, but there's something up with it. And the trailer unfortunately does kind of spoil that there is something going on. I would have loved for it to be a little bit more ambiguous or up for interpretation to some extent, and maybe it is. Maybe that shot in of itself, I won't spoil it just in case you guys don't want to watch the trailer, maybe that shot is ambiguous, but really looking forward to this film regardless of how it turns out, because it looks very competent and it has a lot of potential to be, I guess, a sleeper hit to some extent. But yeah, the silliness of the title and the film itself is definitely brought into the spotlight, so that's good. Now I wanted to bring it to the spotlight too, because if it's a good film, I want people to know about it. And the last trailer I'm going to talk about is a film that I'm actually really excited for. I'm actually surprised they're doing another one, and that is going to be for Jackass Forever. This is technically the fourth Jackass film. For those of you who don't know, back in the early 90s, MTV had a TV series called Jackass, which was essentially a bunch of guys, a bunch of friends, just doing stuff, often referring to them being hurt. And this trailer is essentially just more of that in the modern day age, and I couldn't be more happier. This is the definition of something that I think we all need. 2020 was a rough year, and 2021 hasn't been that much better. And I think people honestly need a nice, fun break. I wouldn't be disrespectful and say that this is a film that you just turn your brain off for, but it definitely seems like it's one of those films that you just put on and you just have a freaking blast. And I do love the fact that compared to the first film, or compared to the very low quality filmed but kind of rustic in a sense original series, it does look like very nicely shot. A lot of the things they're doing look pretty fun as well, and it does seem like it's going to take a little bit more of a kind of like we're pranking our friends kind of mentality, as opposed to us just straight up getting hurt, although you do see a scene of a guy getting bit in the face by a snake, as well as the final shot in the trailer where one of the guys is strapped to a chair and a bear comes in. I'm honestly terrified for him. I don't know how that scene is going to play out. I really hope that's not a real bear or something happens, because bears are, you know, they'll rip you to shreds. But I love the fact that it does seem like they're having a lot of fun. It seems like it's a lot of fun. I love the fact they've got people like Eric Andre, who's just there because of course he would be there. And it's nice to see the interactions between some of the cast. Not all of them are there, unfortunately, but it's great to see, you know, Steve-O and Johnny Knoxville together, and you can really kind of feel that friendship, and it almost kind of has like a sort of like last hurrah, like, you know, one more time kind of vibe to it, because the guys are old, they're in their 50s now, they won't be able to do it forever, and this does kind of seem like a very spur of the moment kind of thing, and I'm all for this. I love Jackass. I wouldn't even consider it a guilty pleasure. I just consider it a great show, despite the fact that when you boil it down, it's just a bunch of guys hurting themselves. It is a movie that I love a lot. It has a special place in my heart. I'm talking about Jackass the movie, and I've seen the other films as well, which I think are great. It is good stuff. It is something we need. You can have the artistic and interesting, well-made films like Lamb, but you can also have Jackass if they serve the purpose of being entertaining, having style, and essentially falling under the idea of being art, because at the end of the day, the people in Jackass, they are performers. They are actors, They put themselves through this. One could argue they are some of the best in the business, given how they play off this kind of stuff. You can't, get, hit in the balls and just, walk that off to some extent. But yeah, really, really, really looking forward to this film. I'm looking forward to almost everything I talked about on this podcast. But yeah, a short one, like I said before. And yeah, I guess the last thing I want to leave you guys with is the video of the episode, which is going to be for Coraline Polachek. I believe I said her name correctly, with Bunny as a Rider. Gotta be honest, this has been one of my favorite songs of the year. So catchy. I've had it almost stuck in my head for a couple of days now, and I'm so glad it was given a music video, which is really creative and has a Tomb Raider-esque vibe to it, which I really love. But yeah, that's pretty much going to do this podcast. Sorry it was so small, and sorry if it sounded a bit unstructured. Like I said, I kind of forgot to do this podcast. And yeah, I do apologize if it did sound awful. Sorry for the rambling when I was talking about the Dead Space remake. It's just, usually when I get a bit annoyed, I find it hard to articulate what exactly I want to say about it, especially when I can't quite read said notes on it. But yeah, thanks so much for the I was gonna say success, but yeah, I guess you could say the success on the last podcast. I see that did really well. Thank you guys. I guess also like this podcast as well. I don't usually ask for that, but it would be nice to kind of start growing the audience as soon as I have a little bit more of an audience on this podcast. I would love to end the year with the podcast averaging it at a slightly higher view count and maybe have some few subscribers. That would really make my year. It would really help, and it does really encourage me and really, really, really make me want to do this podcast, because there's plenty of times where I've just been like, ugh, but it's moments like these and knowing that there are people that legitimately do enjoy this podcast, despite it being such a tiny, tiny drop in the ocean compared to what else is out there. I honestly really do appreciate it. And yeah, I guess I'm going to end this podcast like I always do by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.